You won't need a pen and paper to take part in this workshop. All you'll need are your shoes, or maybe your wellies, and your memories. It's an exercise in autobiography. I use memories a lot in my writing, and I'm going to show you something I've been working on with local people in Musselburgh and North Edinburgh. It's a project you can try too, anywhere in the world. Really, it's just a way to come up with ideas. It helps me organise my interests, my thoughts and feelings and my own memories into a story or a series of stories. We're going to design a kind of story map. When I'm walking for writing, I like to walk on my own, just with the dog. This is Linus. I never take a notebook, but you can if you want. And you can do this other ways too, maybe on a bus route or cycling or driving. My father-in-law drove a lorry, and if you travel long distances like he did, you could have stories all over the road atlas. I don't take notes while I'm on my walk, but I do take photographs. I find this is a helpful tool for remembering later when I do sit down to write. You could also take a voice recorder. I've always been drawn to stories about the past, particularly my family's past, a bit like Who Do You Think You Are? And some of my family came from places I've never visited, although I'd like to one day. Villages in Ukraine and in Poland. Everything I know about them has come from official records. Most of that is just names and dates. They weren't important people historically, so there are no autobiographies about them. A lot of people say that they want to write an autobiography or they want to write things down to pass on, but most people never actually start, or maybe they try but they don't get very far. And I think the problem is a whole life is just too much. It's overwhelming. But wouldn't it be great if you had just 5 memories recorded by someone from the past, someone from your family? And each memory could be just a single personal moment from their lives, a really random moment that they remembered, and maybe a place that they took you to. And I think that would tell you more about them than 100 records. I'm married to an artist called Chris Dukes, and he came up with a name for this idea, which is autopaths. So an autopath is a route with designated stations, and at each station there's a short autobiographical story or a poem or perhaps even a song. Chris made his own autopath for a cycle route, and it's in Edinburgh, and it goes through the Innocent Railway, and it's a very good example of an autopath if you want to listen to a finished tour. My own autopath is in Musselburgh, and mine is a series of small stories. But as I say, yours could be poems or even songs. The stations are set on a route so that others can travel around. And you can think of this as a tour, and you're the tour guide. The tour will take everyone through the stations in your chosen order, and at each station there's a document or a recording that you have created. And you could pick 5 or 10 stations, maybe more. This is my route, and I've marked all the stations I'm going to include here on the map. The stations don't have to be anything famous or anything very literal. The association between your memory and the station can be very personal to you. The more personal, the better. And it might only exist in your mind. The actual event that you're remembering may have happened thousands of miles away, but this means that you can walk round a route in Musselburgh or North Edinburgh and be taken anywhere in the world and to any time in the storyteller's life. Stations could be chosen because something about a place is visually similar to something else, like this one. When I first saw this metal structure, it was not a bicycle rack. The water nearby and the shoulder-width distance between the two rails had me thinking this was a relic of a former swimming pool. Over time, the land encroached on the shallow end, rendering the steps completely pointless. Once, I'd have hunched my shoulders and turned away at the sight of a swimming pool, remembering the freezing water, being the only one in my class made to wear a red cap. To get the white cap, you had to do a length on your front, a length on your back, 30 seconds treading water and fetching a brick from the bottom. I couldn't even do half of it. But things have changed. I still can't swim, but my 6-year-old can. Water's where she moves without aids, and she's fast, brave, and rhythmic. Now, standing here at these grounded swimming pool steps, I don't feel the fear. I think first of her. I imagine her manoeuvring her wheelchair to the water's edge, the effort in that, her bending and lifting her footplate, undoing her waist buckle, and then sliding down, dipping her feet into the blue, her slim pale legs. She slips into the water like a minnow, ready to race. You might also be drawn to something written on a sign. I really like this one. It could be a smell that's in the air. Maybe you've walked close to a factory where they're making something, or a fish and chip shop, or it could be the smell of a particular plant. What memory does it bring to mind? I use local history a lot too, old maps and articles. You can find out what happened in a certain spot, or what building was once here that is no longer visible. And you could relate this to one of your own memories. The shapes of the landscape sometimes bring up memories. Shapes you can see, like the hills, but also shapes you can only find on a map or looking down from above. I have just one memory of my grandmother, but there's also a photograph of this moment, so perhaps what I remember is only what the photo suggests. Dora is fixing the camera. Her dark eyes are half hidden by horned glasses, and you can see the curve of her belly through her wool skirt. Her skin was tanned. My cousin and I are beside her, in our pyjamas, ready for bed. We are not even 2 years old. What I think I remember is some vague sensation of being pulled too close, pressed into the soft side of my grandmother Dora's prickly tweed skirt, and her shirt smooth against my cheek. In the spring of 2013, I visited Berlin, and one of the things I went there to do was walk around the lake that my grandmother once lived beside. As a child, she must have lapped it hundreds of times, walking with her mother, feeding the ducks, perhaps pulling a toy on a string. But she didn't talk about her life in Germany, and I had never even heard the name of the lake before. Weissensee, White Lake, ice white. When I found it on the map of the city, It stuck out because the lake was perfectly round. The lake formed at the end of the Ice Age, when all the snow and ice around melted away, but a stubborn boulder of ice was left behind. I imagine this huge, dense meatball made of ice. By the time it finally started to drip, the land was marked forever. A perfectly round dip was left behind in the earth. And this is how Weissensee began. This lake is not perfectly round, and I'm told it's much more modern. But from this angle, it kind of looks round. I think about my grandmother every time I walk by a lake like this. I wonder if it would have reminded her of home too. She must have remembered, even if she wouldn't talk about it. Some people find it easy to pick stations and others might need a bit more time. You might have to get to know your route very well, travel along it several times, or study it. When I'm walking, I usually don't stop, and I don't particularly try to remember anything. Sometimes I set out from home with an idea already in my head, something I maybe have been thinking about writing about, and then I find a station that matches the idea I already had. Other times the memory comes directly from something that I encounter on the walk. I don't think it matters which one comes first. It's really easy to dismiss random memories, and I think that's why the walk helps. And for me, not having a notebook means I'm a bit more open to every thought. It's important not to filter too much. You don't have to write about the most significant moments in your life. And you don't have to write about your favourite moments. There aren't really any criteria, and the point is just to welcome and tease out a random series of scenes. You could try this with a group, and if everyone lives in the same town, you'll probably get something that looks a bit like an underground map with junctions. There are always these stations that get chosen by several people. These are places that evoke lots of responses. I like it when this happens because you'll get very different ways of reading the same place. And it really shows how the spaces we inhabit can mean very different things to different people. The other thing that I like about this project is that it can breathe life into spaces where there's nothing very obviously noteworthy. There might be no landmarks, no particular reason to pass by. A story can give meaning to an otherwise empty space. You can kind of put your stamp on it. The main thing here is just not to feel overwhelmed. You're not writing your entire life story because you don't need to. You don't have to pick your favourite, your most important moments. Think of it as an autobiography distilled, or a homeopathic dose. If you can't get out to explore as easily, you could also do a virtual tour. You can pick a place, it could be anywhere, and you can virtually walk along the streets using Google Street View. And you can choose a route to write about. Keep a look at the Book Festival's Citizen Project blog. For some of the tours our participants are writing at the moment. I hope this video will also inspire you to give it a try yourself. Thanks for joining me and Linus on our walk.